Welcome to Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Weldin. Today's story is called The Tale of the Beauty Who Chose to Sleep, an adaptation of a classic fairy tale written for you by Dan Wendelin. Stay tuned for more information about Dan and his work at the end of the story. Thanks! Enjoy the episode! The Beauty Who Chose to Sleep. A beautiful young woman stands before a spinning wheel, slowly reaching out her hand toward the sharp point of its needle. A tall, elegant fairy, both handsome and pretty, whispers into her ear, encouraging her to accept her destiny. The fairy thinks they know what is fated to happen next. You also may think that you know what is going to happen next. You may think that you know this story. I promise you, though, gentle listener, that you do not. Not even the beautiful young woman knows what is going to happen next. Her fate is not yet written. Would you like to know why? Then I have a story to tell you. The tale of the beauty who chose to sleep. It begins, like all good fairy tales, with these words. Once upon a time, a beautiful baby princess was born to King Marco and Queen Maria. They loved her more than anything in the world, and when the time came to christen her with a name, they invited everyone to celebrate with them. When I tell you they invited everyone, listener, I'm not exaggerating. Messengers poured from the castle day and night, carrying invitations to all those that lived in their kingdom, the neighboring kingdoms, and the kingdoms beyond, to the far reaches of the earth. They invited men and women, fairies and unicorns, giants and dwarves. I'm sorry to tell you, though, that they made a terrible mistake. They did not invite Mala, the ruler of the Fae. Mala demanded perfect manners and was notorious for their quick temper. The king and queen did not want to spend their daughter's naming celebration worried about offending the prickly Fae. They also feared what Mala might do if angered. Unfortunately, a certain blabbermouth bluebird wandered into the fairy realms and sang to Mala about all the party preparations and the flood of messengers bearing invitations. When no invitation arrived at the Fae Palace, Mala was furious. On the day of the celebration, King Marco and Queen Maria welcomed their guests. They introduced their precious baby and christened her Bonita. Everyone cheered, and visitors lined up to see the infant and present her with wondrous gifts. Suddenly, though, a hush fell over the crowd. They turned to see the castle gates silently swing open. Looming in the entrance was a tall figure perfectly dressed in robes so white that they glowed. The fairies in the crowd bowed low as their ruler strode forward to stand before baby Bonita and her worried parents. King Marco, Queen Maria, Mala murmured, nodding to each of them. What a beautiful child. A pity I did not receive an invitation to her christening, or I would have had time to prepare a proper gift. Please don't trouble yourself, Your Majesty, Queen Maria whispered. The honor of your presence is gift enough. Indeed, Mala replied, but gifts are proper at christenings, just like invitations, and I believe in observing the proper forms. Since I have no gift prepared, I shall give her a promise. On her 18th birthday, Bonita shall prick her finger on the spindle of a spinning wheel and fall asleep for 100 years. When she wakes, she will have left behind all of you ill-mannered rabble. No! Shouted King Marco. Please, Mala, don't do this. You dare raise your voice to me? Mala replied icily. For your insolence, I shall teach you to keep silent. You may never tell the child about my gift. The fairy gestured to the assembled guests. All of you, This will be my birthday surprise for her." As Mala turned to go, though, another figure appeared at the gates of the palace. She appeared to be an old beggar woman. Her face was deeply wrinkled with laugh lines, and her gnarled hands gripped a crooked wooden cane. The way her dusty feet skipped lightly across the room, though, hinted that she may not have been as elderly as she seemed. "What are you doing out of the forest?" Mala demanded. "Surely no one invited you." The old woman curtsied briskly to Mala, but then her face crinkled into a mischievous grin, and she stepped boldly around the Fey ruler. "No one invited me," she replied, "but I simply cannot resist a christening." She stepped up to the baby's crib and gazed down with a smile. "What did you name her?" she asked the parents. "Bonita," the queen replied. "Oh, a fitting name for such a lovely baby," the strange woman said. Then she bent low, kissed the baby gently on the forehead, and whispered, "I too have a gift to bestow. I grant you the freedom to choose your own path." The old woman turned, met Mala's disapproving glare with a wink, and added, "Shall we go?" When the two strange intruders had departed, the party continued, but a shadow had fallen over their happiness. Everyone wondered what these strange events would mean. King Marco and Queen Maria were very frightened by the fairy ruler's grim gift. Desperate to protect Bonita, they burned every spinning wheel in the castle and threatened punishment to anyone who allowed a spindle near the princess. As Bonita grew older, they tried to tell her the story of Mala's visit on her naming day, but the curse held them fast, and they could give her no warning by word or deed. Bonita was a wonderful child, smart, curious, and friendly. She loved to watch the craftsmen of the castle and learn about their skills. Like anyone, dear listener, she did tend to become irritable when she was tired. Unfortunately, because of her insatiable curiosity and desire to take part in all the activities of the castle, she did her very best to avoid taking naps. After one temper tantrum too many, the king and queen decreed that Bonita must take a nap every afternoon, a task her nursemaids found quite difficult to enforce. One fine summer afternoon when Bonita was 7 years old, she was hiding in the garden from a nanny who was trying to take her back to her room to rest. She noticed that the garden gate had been left open to the woods beyond. Bonita slipped through the open gate, lured by the prospect of a better hiding place in the forest. Bonita had never ventured into the forest alone, and the trees seemed to close ranks behind her as she walked, swiftly hiding the castle walls. She had not gone far before she came to a clearing with a little cottage. The door was open, and when Bonita peeked inside, she saw an old woman using a crooked wooden cane to lift a whistling tea kettle off the fire. "Hello," Bonita said. The old woman looked over at her and smiled. "Hello, Bonita," she said. "You're just in time. The water has just boiled for my tea and your hot chocolate. Make yourself comfortable," she said, gesturing to a large chair covered with a dozen mismatched pillows. "Who are you?" Bonita asked. "How do you know my name?" "Oh, I'm no one important," the woman replied. "But you can call me Amani. Everyone knows who you are, princess. Now, would you like marshmallows in your chocolate?" "Yes, please," said Bonita. She accepted the hot chocolate and sank back into the chair's soft pillows before taking a sip. She sighed with contentment as the chocolate filled her with warmth. "Now then," said Amani, "why are you out in the forest alone?" "I'm hiding," said Bonita. "They want me to take a nap, but I'm not tired, and I have so many things I want to do." She frowned. "I don't see why I'm supposed to take a nap anyway. Naps are for babies." "Oh, I understand," said Amani with a nod. She sipped her tea. Sometimes I take a nap even when I'm not sleepy. The world always seems better after a little rest."
"Well, I'm not tired,"
said Bonita with a yawn. "Although your chair is very comfortable." "I'm glad you like my chair," Amani replied. "Feel free to relax in it for as long as you like." Bonita set her cup of chocolate down. Her eyelids felt very heavy. "I'm just going to rest here for a minute," she said. "Then I have to find a better hiding place." She snuggled down into the pillows and listened to a bird singing in the forest. She closed her eyes to listen better. She drifted off to sleep. Bonita woke to Amani softly humming a lullaby. She sat up and stretched. "Was I asleep long?" she asked. "No," said Amani with a smile. "Just a short nap. How do you feel?" Bonita smiled back. "I'm ready to go see what's going on in the castle," she said. "The blacksmith is going to shoe some horses this afternoon, and he said I can watch." "Thank you for the chocolate, Miss Amani." "You're welcome, Bonita," Amani replied. Bonita hurried back through the woods to her castle. Later, she told her parents about meeting Amani in the woods. The next day, they accompanied her, with a group of guards, to see the hidden cottage. Somehow, though, Bonita couldn't find the clearing in the woods. Just trees, trees, trees. Her parents assured her that they believed her, but warned her that sometimes fairies lurked in the woods, and that she should not venture into the forest alone. Listener, I must tell you that Bonita, although she loved her parents, did not obey their rule about the forest. Over the next few years, she made her way into the woods many times. But although she explored the forest until she knew it by heart, she did not see Amani again for many years. Now, this may surprise you, dear listener, but teenagers do not always get along perfectly with their parents. Bonita, who had always wanted to make her own decisions, was no exception. But there is one day that I must tell you about if you are to understand what led Bonita to her fateful encounter with the fairy and its spindle. Bonita was 15 years old, and she and her parents were visiting the neighboring kingdom of Mughal. The rulers of Mughal were old friends of King Marco and Queen Maria, and they wanted to form a permanent alliance between their realms by marrying Bonita to their son, Prince Akbar. Bonita was not really sure how she felt about this idea. She did like Prince Akbar. They had known each other since they had been small children. He made her laugh with jokes, and he had a kind face. The problem was that, sometimes, he annoyed her. He was a prince and rather too used to getting his own way. This particularly bothered Bonita because she was also accustomed to people obeying her. And I must admit to you, listener, that she could be a bit bossy. To make matters worse, on this particular day, Bonita and her family had arrived late the previous evening, then stayed up even later greeting their hosts and talking. Bonita had slept poorly in a strange bed, so she was rather tired and short-tempered. Prince Akbar was doing his best to be a good host and offered to show Bonita various parts of his home. "Would you like to go see the cook, the blacksmith, the armorer, the messenger pigeons?" he asked as he recited all the interesting places he thought Bonita might like. To each question, Bonita would respond, "No, we have one of those, and I already know how that works." "How about we go watch a goose lay golden eggs?" Akbar asked. "Really?" Bonita asked, perking up. "Well, I'd love to see that." "Me too," said Akbar with a mischievous grin. "Do you know where we can find one?" Bonita rolled her eyes at her friend's silliness, then sighed, resigning herself to an afternoon like any other. Until Akbar asked, "Do you want to go watch them spin thread for the new tapestries?" "Wait," said Bonita. "You make your own thread here?" "Sure," Akbar replied. "I thought everyone did." Bonita frowned. She had watched weavers and seamstresses in her own castle at their work and had tried her hand at weaving and sewing, but she had never pondered how the thread was made. "I've never seen that before," she said. "Let's go." They entered a room where weavers were at work, spinning great handfuls of wool into delicate skeins of yarn in a rainbow of colors. "Oh!" Bonita exclaimed. "It's like magic!" Fascinated, she crossed the room to get a closer look. As she approached a weaver who was using a spindle to spin red wool into a perfect thread, Bonita suddenly heard her father call her name. "Bonita!" he shouted angrily. "Get away from there!" Bonita turned, thinking for a moment that he must be joking, but when she saw the anger on his face, she was confused. "But father," she said, "you must see what they're doing. They're spinning their own thread. It's wonderful." "You could get hurt," he replied, grabbing her hand and pulling her out the door. "Are you all right, dear?" her mother asked. "You didn't injure yourself playing with the spindles, did you?" Bonita felt an icy knot of anger growing in the pit of her stomach. She yanked her hand from her father's grasp. "Why are you treating me like a child?" she asked. "I'm 15 years old. All I was doing was watching them spin yarn, which is probably the safest activity in this whole castle. Not only that, you humiliated me in front of Prince Akbar." Her parents just stood there for a moment, looking at her with a mixture of anger and sadness that both confused Bonita and stoked her fury. "We must explain this incident to our hosts," her father said. "You are not to go anywhere near a spinning wheel or spindle ever again. Do you understand me?" "But," Bonita protested. "No," yelled her father. "You must agree to obey me or we shall leave immediately." "Fine," Bonita agreed angrily. "Come, Prince Akbar," her father said. "We must speak with your parents." Prince Akbar glanced over at Bonita, sharing her confusion. She rolled her eyes to indicate that her parents had clearly lost their minds. Shrugging apologetically, Akbar followed her parents into the castle keep, closing the door behind them. Bonita was outraged. Not only had her parents embarrassed her in front of Akbar and treated her like a child, but now they were going to explain to him and his family without her. She was so angry that she briefly considered going back into the weaver's room and spinning some yarn purely to spite her parents. Instead, she decided that she needed to get away from this annoying castle with its annoying weavers, annoying prince, and most of all, her annoying parents. She turned and stomped out the castle gate. As soon as she was out of sight, she turned off the road and walked into the cool green of the woods. She had gone only a few paces before she was struck by how much these trees reminded her of the forest at home. She looked back at the road only to find that it was already hidden by trees. The cold knot of anger began to loosen as she was suddenly overcome by the clear memory of being 7 years old and running into the forest to hide. She was not entirely surprised when a few more steps carried her into a familiar clearing. The little cottage looked exactly the same, as if she had stepped away for 8 seconds instead of 8 years. The door stood open, and she could hear the sound of familiar humming from within. Bonita peered through the doorway. Amani turned to look back at her with a rustle of clothing that sounded exactly like leaves in a gentle breeze. "Hello, Bonita," said Amani with a wink. "It's good to see you again." "So you live here now?" Bonita asked. "I looked everywhere for you." "I've always been here," Amani said with a smile. "You find me when you need me. Come in and sit down." The very comfortable chair was every bit as soft and welcoming as Bonita remembered. "Hot chocolate?" Amani asked. "No, I'll take tea," Bonita replied, feeling unreasonably as though she wanted to find a reason to be angry with Amani too. "I'm not a little girl anymore." Amani regarded her for a moment. "No, she said. "You are certainly not." She went back to pouring the tea. "Cream and sugar?" she asked. "Yes, please," Bonita responded. "No, wait. I don't want to talk about tea. I want to know who you are. I want to know what you are. My parents said you might be a fairy." Amani laughed. "I already told you," she murmured. "I'm no one important." She gestured to the humble walls of her tiny cottage with her cane. "Does this look like the home of a magical being to you?" She scoffed. She set the tea down in front of Bonita. "So," she continued, "what brings you into my woods today?" Bonita sipped her tea. It was very good, although Bonita had to admit that it didn't seem one bit magical. In spite of herself, she began to relax. She sighed. "My parents treat me like a child," she began. Then she told the whole story of the day's events. Amani listened intently, never interrupting. "I can't believe they think so little of me that they think I might hurt myself with a spindle. I just wish they would treat me with respect and explain," Bonita finished. Amani nodded. "Oh, it does seem strange," she replied. "It's almost as if there's something more going on that they can't explain." She winked. Bonita drained the last of her tea, then stopped and examined Amani's face. "You know something, don't you?" she asked. "Tell me what's going on." "I can't," Amani replied with a shrug. "Can't or won't?" Bonita demanded. "I'm sorry, Bonita," Amani returned. "There are rules, and even I must sometimes follow them. But I can promise you that when the time comes, you will have a choice, and I believe that you'll make a good one." Bonita snorted in exasperation. "Well, thanks for the tea, I guess," she said. She sank back into Amani's unreasonably comfortable chair. "I bet this chair is magical," she grumbled. "Do you mind if I rest here a while?" "Stay as long as you like," Amani replied. "You look tired." "Yeah," Bonita said. "I could use a nap." Amani laughed. "Last time you were here, you were running away from a nap," she said. Bonita yawned.
Well, I'm not a little girl anymore.
She sighed. She drifted off to sleep to the sounds of the leaves rustling and Amani's soft humming. The princess woke to the sound of Akbar calling her name. When she opened her eyes, she was lying on a bed of moss, her head pillowed against a rock. She sat up. "I'm here," she called. Prince Akbar emerged into the clearing moments later, looking relieved to see her. "There you are," he said. "Are you all right?" "Of course," Bonita replied, still feeling a bit annoyed with him. "I went for a walk while you were busy having a secret meeting with our parents." "Oh, you know how meetings go," he joked. "They're mostly about agendas and minutes and motions and rules of order. Hardly ever any secrets actually worth keeping." Bonita refused to smile. "Then tell me what they said," she demanded. Akbar sat down beside her, looking troubled. "I can't," he said. "But you should listen to your parents. They love you and they're just trying to keep you safe." Bonita shot to her feet. "I can't believe you're taking their side," she fumed. "I can find my own way back to the castle." The rest of that visit was rather tense. Bonita and Akbar carefully avoided the subject of the spindle incident and managed to keep themselves entertained. They continued to visit back and forth over the next several years, but a nagging splinter of resentment had lodged in Bonita's heart. Listener, as I'm sure you expected, on Bonita's 18th birthday, King Marco and Queen Maria again threw a grand party. They invited everyone who knew their beloved daughter and also pretty much everyone who didn't. Seeking to make amends for their mistake, they sent an invitation to Mala, but received no reply. Princess Bonita herself, I'm afraid to say, did not enjoy her party very much at all. She had slept poorly the night before, troubled by excitement about her birthday and worry about the responsibilities of adulthood. Most of all, she lay awake wondering whether her betrothal to Prince Akbar was a terrible mistake. After all, if he refused to support her about something as simple and silly as a spinning wheel, would he respect her about more important things when they were married? So she was very tired and felt a bit overwhelmed by the large number of guests who wanted to wish her well. Seeking a moment of rest, she slipped away from the party. When she entered her room, though, she was surprised to see a pale, regal fairy, dressed all in the brightest white. "Princess Bonita," the fairy said, "I am Mala, ruler of the Fae. I have brought you a birthday gift. It is a simple gift, but one that those who claim to love you have refused you." Mala stepped aside, revealing a spinning wheel glowing white. "Oh," Bonita exclaimed, "I've always wanted to try one of these." She stepped toward the wheel. "Indeed," Mala nodded. "But you should know, Princess, that my gift is no ordinary spinning wheel. It is a solution to all your problems. For when you touch it, you will sleep for 100 years. Bonita stopped. "Really?" she asked. Mala moved to her side and placed a hand on Bonita's shoulder, guiding her toward the wheel. "Yes," the Fae whispered. "Touch it and sleep while your problems are washed away by the gentle waters of time. When you wake, your parents, your prince, all those that frustrate you, will be gone. I offer you freedom, Princess Bonita. Seize the spindle of the wheel. Seize your fate." And so my story has arrived, dear listener, to the moment where we began. Bonita stands before the spinning wheel, fated with a choice. She considers the freedom that Mala offers. 100 years of rest, a voyage into the future, leaving behind her parents and their rules, her prince and the burdens of ruling a kingdom. I am so tired, Bonita thinks. Perhaps a little rest will do me good. She drops her hand to her side and looks into Mala's cold eyes. Through the open window of her room, a warm breeze carries the smells of the surrounding forest. Wait, thinks Bonita. This is what they feared. Suddenly, Bonita understands her parents' strange behavior with perfect clarity. "You're right, O ruler of the Fae," Bonita says. "Arguing with my parents, demanding that my prince respect me, preparing to rule this country, all these struggles tire me." The fairy smiles. Bonita turns away from the spinning wheel and crosses the room to her bed. "But these struggles are mine," she continues, "and I choose to keep them." She stretches and yawns immensely. "You had a good suggestion, though. I'm going to take a nap." She lies back, closes her eyes, and drifts off to sleep. When Bonita wakes, the regal fairy is gone. The spinning wheel remains, but now it is only an ordinary wheel. Bonita crosses to it and sits down. Then, carefully avoiding the sharp point of the spindle, she begins to spin a new thread. When the king and queen run in looking panicked a few minutes later, they find Bonita smiling and humming to herself as she spins. "What happened?" the queen asks. "Are you okay?" "I met a fairy," Bonita replies, "and I took a nap. From now on, no one gets to spin the story of my life but me." The end. Thanks for listening.